just want to say very briefly the usual little things about keeping your mobile phones on silent, and if you want to make a call, please step outside. I'm also supposed to tell you that that's the emergency exit. Since it's the only entrance and exit, I don't know if it's much good in the case of an emergency. However, having said that, the session is meant to be for an hour, and we want to leave a little time for question and answer at the end of it, so that's a request to the panelists here so there can be some exchange, discussion. Let me introduce Dr. Nausheen Anwar, who's sitting beside me. She teaches at the IBA in Karachi here, and is working on some structural projects around the city of Karachi. She holds a master's in international relations from Columbia and a doctorate from Columbia in urban planning, and she holds has done a postdoctoral fellowship at Harvard prior to coming here. Few words, because I think we're very short on time, we're behind schedule, so I'll hand over to Dr. Anwar.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the Karachi Literature Festival and our panel over here on Megacities. Our three panelists today are very esteemed writers, teachers, philosophers in their respective fields, who are going to engage with the theme of the megacity in different ways, but in ways that also overlap and will hopefully engage you in lively discussions towards the end of the session. We will begin with Mr. Ronald D'Souza, who is chairperson of a leading NGO called Sherry. Some of you might be familiar with this NGO, which is based out of Karachi. They're very active and they're very well known now. And Sherry is involved in a variety of issues spanning illegal constructions or violations of land use and zoning controls, to civil society mobilization campaigns, to conservation and environmental protection. Our second speaker will be Mr. H.M. Naqvi, who is an award-winning author of his first novel, Homeboy, for which he received in 2011 the DSC Prize for South Asian Literature. Now based in Karachi, Mr. Naqvi is writing his second novel, which will be set in his own words, and quote, a bona fide megalopolis. End quote. And our third panelist, who really needs no introduction in my opinion, but I will do the formalities nevertheless, because Arif Hassan Saab's name is synonymous with Karachi's myriad urban challenges, its urban growth issues, both from an economic, a built environment, and a social perspective. Mr. Hassan is an architect and planner, a teacher, a social researcher, and a prolific writer. He puts academics like me to shame. He has been a consultant to various United Nations agencies, international organizations, non-governmental organizations, and community groups, both in the North and in the Global South. Mr. Hassan is renowned for his involvement with low-income settlement programs. The Urangi Pilot Project, to which he has been a consultant for many years, has attracted international attention. And in 1990, the Japanese government presented Mr. Hassan with its International Year for the Shelterless Memorial Award. So we have three very esteemed speakers in our panel today. Each speaker will speak for approximately 10 minutes. And at the end of all three presentations, we will open up the forum to discussions, which will last for approximately 25, 30 minutes, give or take a few minutes here and there, since we are delayed. So I would like to give the forum to Mr. Ronald D'Souza, who will be our first speaker of this morning.
The president of a country once came on TV. No, it's not President Zardari. And told the people, he says, I've got bad news and I've got good news. He says, the bad news is that we are running out of wheat and we're going to have to make bread out of mud. And now for the good news. We have plenty of mud. So I am going to start off with the bad news, and hopefully the people who come after me will be able to correct some of that and give you some of the good news. Cities are a very recent phenomenon. The earth has been around for 4.5 billion years, man in some form or the other for maybe 6 million years. But cities, as you see this chart, starting 12,000 years ago, man at that time was a hunter-gatherer. He just wandered around, picked stuff off the trees, killed maybe a rabbit or so, and moved around in nomadic groups of about 10 to 50 people. It's only when he discovered agriculture, which is about 12,000 years ago, in the year 10,000 BC, that he became sedentary and he started living in one single place. Now this chart, which runs from 10,000 BC to the year 2000, shows when cities were developed. The end there we have Karachi, which probably came into existence as a city maybe 200 years ago. Now the population of the world at the year 10,000 BC was just 5 million people all over the world. And it increased by the year 2000 to 150 million. It is only 200 years ago that it reached 1 billion. And today we are at 7 billion. Everything that has happened in this world has happened in the last 200 years. Most of the problems we face today, most of the discoveries, most of the advances are just 200 years old. Next. In the last 200 years, this shows you what man has been doing. The increase in population, the increase in his consumption, the increase in his destruction of the environment. Various features are given there, and it shows you how these are escalating over the last 200 years, more so over the last 50 years. Next. The world basically has two problems. One is the problem of consumption of population, where in the last 200 years we have increased from 1 billion to 7 billion. And the other one is consumption, where if you compare yourself, for instance, to the consumption of your grandfather, you find that you are consuming, or your children are consuming, at least 100 times what he was doing. Now this has tremendous effect on the habitations and the cities of the world. One of them is our pollution of the world. An example is the greenhouse effect. This is a small introduction to what the greenhouse effect is, where heat from the sun comes to the earth and is generally reflected back into space, a lot of it. But because of greenhouse gases that we put into the air, a lot of it bounces back and does not escape into the upper atmosphere, thereby increasing the level of the Earth's temperature. These gases, as you can see here, from the time of the Industrial Revolution 200 years ago, have also been moving upwards. Carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. This is a major problem. These are the climate change effects in our megacities. Now what is happening is that man is moving to the cities. 50% of the world's population today, worldwide, lives in cities. In Pakistan, it is probably a little less, maybe 35 or 40%. But as people move to the cities, America, for instance, has 98% of people living in urban areas. And this is a trend where people are moving towards the coast and towards the large cities. Now, in places like Pakistan, we are being overwhelmed with such movements of people and are unable to cope with our planning and our governance with the increase in population. I will go into some of the effects of climate change in urban areas. The rising temperatures we've already discussed, leading to increasingly severe weather, cyclones, storms, droughts, rising sea levels. Some of you may be aware that 2 years ago, the Maldives had one of their cabinet meetings underwater to try and point out to the world that sea level would eventually overwhelm them. The average height of the Maldives above the sea is only 2 meters. places like Bangladesh and a lot of other areas of the world will resume. Melting of the ice cap. These are the areas and the megacities. The blue dots are the cities. The big dot is the one that has population above 10 million. And if you notice, India and Pakistan are particularly prone to damage. We experienced some of this damage the year before last when floods up in the north, in the Punjab, and more so in Sindh, devastated the land. How do we contribute to these greenhouse gas emissions in cities? One that is urban sprawl. There was an article in yesterday's papers about the new planning of Lahore, where new habitations are being planned at great distances from the center of Lahore. Elite consumerism. We believe that Pakistan is making a lot of progress because of all the new shopping malls that we have, the big hotels, the entertainment areas. The increased dependence on private vehicles. Instead of using public transport, everybody now has a car or a motorcycle. Industrial development. Remember, all of these things are within the last 200 years. Building air conditioning. We are sitting in an air-conditioned room right now. Perhaps 40 years ago, a similar conference would have been held under Shamiana, no air conditioning. We needed to travel halfway across the city for those people who don't live in defense to get to this place. CO2 emissions. This gives you a range of countries that have and the amount of CO2 emissions. The country on the left is Qatar. You look at America, it's not. America is somewhere down there in the middle. The top line is the average of the rich countries. The middle line is the world average, and the bottom line is of the middle income countries. The last line is the emissions of the poor countries. The effect of climate change falls disproportionately on poor people. Most of the people in places like Pakistan, India, Africa, Asia are people who are poor. And whenever anything happens, these are the people who suffer. Sea level rise in coastal cities, cyclone damage, flooding. The poor children, women are especially vulnerable. Climate migration is things that cause people to move. We have experienced this in Pakistan, where a lot of people over the last 2 years have moved from the rural areas to the urban areas because of destruction due to climate change. Droughts, flood insurance policy. I understand that after Katrina, there was an increase in the amount of flood insurance that was being taken out by cities in America. But this is not something that is actually feasible for the developing world. What can we do? One, we need to improve governance. The cities, their administrations, their municipalities, the governments need to be able to cope with the number of people who are coming in. We need to develop new cities so that everything is not concentrated in one place. We need to reduce sprawl. Although Sherry has conventionally been against high-rise, it is the way to reduce energy consumption, the way to reduce distribution of utilities all over the large city. We need to get efficient transportation systems, and we need to develop change adaptation measures in coastal cities. Now, one common thing that is said is that this problem over the last 200 years has been generally caused by the West, and they are the ones who should actually do something about it. While this is true, the fact that we are the ones who are going to suffer the most is something that we should recognize, and therefore there are two problems as I started off with. One is increasing population and the other is increasing consumerism. Both of these need to be tackled by everybody in the world. We need to live simpler lives and we need to reduce our population. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Let me go up there, back up there, and sit down. Mr. Naqvi, the floor is yours now.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am an urban animal. I am a denizen of this city. I'm not a sociologist, anthropologist. I am a storyteller. And as a storyteller, this city fascinates me. Karachi's history, in some way or form, does not extend beyond 300